So let's launch into primary. I asked both of you before the show to give me your list, your top 3 things to watch for people to watch for on primary night. So we're going to get to both of your lists. We're going to start.
It's like the dating game.
This is. So tell me, what are your top 3? So let's go ahead and start with Nolan's list. Let's go ahead and take a look at what Nolan says to watch for. We're going to talk about each one. So your top 3 is the Wayne County Executives race, the 11th Congressional District, and Proposal 1. So let's dive into the Wayne County Executive race. We've talked a little bit about this before and how there's such a large field, and now it's come down really to about a top 3.
Maybe a top 2. I don't know. I think one thing's fairly certain. I think we'd both probably agree on this, is that Bob Ficano's not going to be the next county executive.
Yeah.
I think this is a race now between Warren Evans and William Wild. Ficano had surprisingly little financial support, hasn't spent a whole lot of money on this race, hasn't had the money to spend. Wild's had a lot of money, but he started from low name recognition. Evans benefits from being the only Detroiter in the race, the only true Detroit candidate in the race. And I think, you know, that's going to come down between those two.
And of course, we couldn't have any kind of election without someone talking about a residency issue, and before the filing deadline.
Disqualify somebody. It's not an election unless you can disqualify someone from the ballot now, right? It's like a constant issue. And I thought the judge in that case actually made a very good point, which was this sort of efforts at nullification rather than letting voters decide for themselves who should get these offices is a problem. I mean, it undermines people's confidence in the system. It makes everything seem like a setup or a scam, and so the people doing this have got to be a little more prudent about picking their shots.
Politics has come a gotcha game now.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's trying to win sort of through tactics rather than through making their case to the voters.
All right, but whoever comes out of this on Tuesday, this is going to be a huge job for whoever ends up taking on being the Wayne County executive.
Well,
obviously have to get through the main election in November, but it's expected to be along the Democrat side.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be a Democrat. I mean, there are 3 Republican primary challenges, I believe, but none of them has any real name recognition or money. But you're right, this is a huge job, and I think the primary task in this job is corralling the other electeds in Wayne County, the prosecutor and the sheriff, to work better together on budget issues. And that was one of the reasons that we supported Warren Evans at the Free Press for this job, was that we felt like his relationship with those other 2 offices, one of which he's done before, I mean, he was the sheriff, is going to give him an advantage there.
Well, right, Nolan, last word on Wayne County executive race.
We didn't support Warren Evans, we supported Bill Wild, was because more than anything, Wayne County needs a culture change. You don't get a culture change by reaching back and getting old familiar faces who've been part of the scandals in the past.
Well, wait a minute, Warren's not been part of the scandal.
Have benefited from the self-serving government in Wayne County. Warren Evans has been drawing a pension from that county since he was in his 40s. He will draw a pension and his salary as Wayne County executive. That's the kind of thing that got Wayne County in trouble, and certainly was involved in scandal. He was fired for the police department in scandals. So, I mean, this has been going on in Wayne County for 30, 40 years or longer. Why not start fresh with somebody who's not tainted by the system?
All right, voters will have to decide that one on Tuesday. Let's go ahead and take a look at Nolan's list again, because I think number 2 on your list, the thing to watch for, was the 11th Congressional District race. So you're looking at Dave Trott and Kerry Benevolio here.
Most likely raced for an where an incumbent might get beaten this time, I think. Trott's ran a very good race. Benevolio's disappeared for an incumbent. He's been almost nowhere in this campaign. Yeah, but you still have the benefit of incumbency, and you know, he just has refused to show up at places, refused to campaign. Trott's campaigning all out. I think Trott will probably prevail in this, and he'll set up a good race in the fall.
Stephen, thoughts in terms of watching this one?
Yeah, and I think Trott has this pretty well in hand. I mean, the polls didn't show Benevolio even within, I thought it was 10 points, right?
It was 22 last poll.
Was it 22? I mean, and it is about money. I mean, Dave Trott has a lot more ability to campaign than Benevolio does, and what's the power of incumbency give him? I mean, it's not like he's a senior member of Congress or can can use the legislation that he's introduced, or I don't think he's done anything.
No, but he did have John Boehner come up here for a fundraiser about a year ago or so.
It was a while ago.
It was last fall. So he could have
campaign.
used that perhaps a little bit more to his advantage. But is this talking about someone who is just not even an experienced politician enough?
Well, he was an accidental candidate, and he never expected to be in Congress, and then he was. And I still think there's that feeling of this is a guy who just lucked into this seat, and voters recognize that.
Well, and it's a question of the GOP establishment against a guy who has the seat but has never been really part of that mainstream. So.
All right. Well, let's look. The last thing that Nolan brought up was Proposal 1. The personal property tax.
I think it's a very important proposal. I mean, it's a very important fix to Michigan's tax system. It may be the worst worded ballot proposal ever in Michigan. It is confusing.
That's saying something.
It was like it was written by, by a Chinese outsourced person, someone who didn't even speak English. It is barely legible. Are literate. The way the ballot proposal is worded, that's going to cause confusion. And, this could go down simply because voters don't know what the heck they're voting on.
So if people don't understand it, Stephen, you think that people won't turn out and vote either way?
I actually think this is going to pass because there's been such a coordinated effort to push it. Most elected officials are supporting it. You've got a few outliers who've been pretty loud about it, but they're in the distinct minority. And there's been a very good independent campaign to make sure that this passes. The thing is, if this doesn't pass, you really are screwing local government in a way that they would not recover from. This is not maybe the ideal way to get rid of the personal property tax, but it's the only way to replace the money that local governments get from it. So I don't see it as much of a real choice, and I'm a little astonished actually at the local leadership who have come out against it. I mean, Jim Fouts in Warren, I'm not clear
it's just a
on
handful of those, Steve.
where he's coming from or what he thinks the alternative is.
You could say that any day of the week about Jim Fouts, but it's it's just a couple of three local officials. There's overwhelming support for this. If the ballot language were more clear, I think there would be no worries at all about this race. But Steve's right; it is essential piece of business for Michigan. This has got to pass.
And for municipal finance. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at Stephen's list of the top 3 things that we need to watch for. So when you were crafting your list, and I'm sure it took you a while, you said watch for. Let's talk about this first one: voter turnout.
Yeah, well,
How so?
Any primary, right,
is always difficult.
And maybe it's me, but it just does not seem like election season right now. I mean, it doesn't.
Why?
It doesn't feel like, and maybe it's because I live in the city, I'm not seeing as many signs as normal. I am not hearing people talk about the fact that there's an election on Tuesday. It just doesn't have that energy that you normally have around an election, and so that could, I think, result in even fewer people showing up for a primary, which doesn't normally draw that many folks.
I think it's because it's so cold. But,
it's fall already.
I hate the August primary, and I think August is just the worst time to hold an election. Too many people are doing too many other things. I would support a change to a May primary, or even
we used to have a September, right?
Primary. So the August primary is just a it's made for a low turnout. And I think one thing we should do is never put a tax proposal on the August primary, because again, it's such a low turnout, and yet we have a couple of tax proposals on this ballot, the SMART and the Wayne County school millage, that are pretty important, that are going to be decided by a very small number of voters.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at Stephen's list again and see what the next thing was on his list. Incumbents in trouble. We've already referenced Wayne County Executive Bob Ficano and Bentivolio.
Yeah, but I think John Conyers has a bigger challenge on his hands this time than he has before.
Do you think Horace Sheffield has made some traction with voters?
He's worked hard.
He's worked really hard. He is a good campaigner. He is someone with deep community ties. He has run the right kind of campaign. I mean, we did not end up endorsing him in that race, but he's making the right case for himself, which is that he would restore the bond between voters in that district and the congressperson there. That John Conyers, he thinks, is much more of a sort of national kind of representative or a symbol who doesn't do a lot for folks in that district. So I don't know. I don't, no one has ever been able to even come close, quite frankly, to bettering Conyers in that district. But I think we will see Sheffield get closer than anyone has before.
Should John Conyers win on Tuesday, is there a conversation, Nolan, that's happening within his camp, talking about, all right, these next 2 years, what does the next 2 years hold for him?
Well, I think that's a conversation that should have started 2 years ago. So I doubt it. I think the people in his camp are desperate to keep him propped up and in Congress so they can continue their own jobs and their own connections. I don't think any of this is about John Conyers or his well-being.
Do you think that's a fair assessment, Stephen?
I'm not sure. I mean, there are so many different people around him now. I mean, even the sort of long-standing people in that office a lot of them have sort of gravitated away from him. I agree that it is about. I think it is about John Conyers. I mean, he said some very strong things this week in an interview on public radio about why he's running, about why he will not sort of step aside, and seem to indicate that not just that he believes he should be running now, but that we'll see him again in 2 years. So I mean, I think this is someone who really does like his job. He feels like he's still got things he wants to do. He will be the dean of the House if he's reelected, and that means something to him. So
And unless voters turn him out, they'll carry him out on a board. He'll never retire.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at Stephen's last thing to watch for on primary day. Oakland or Detroit for the 14th Congressional District? Explain that.
Yeah, well, I think that race has turned out to be really interesting. I mean, you've got two very strong Oakland County candidates in Rudy Hobbs, who's in the legislature, and Brenda Lawrence, who's the Southfield mayor. That is, a heavily Oakland County district. I think the majority of the votes, in fact, are in Oakland County. But the poll shows Hanson Clark, who is a Detroiter and used to represent that district when it was when it was all Detroit, is way out in the lead. And I've sort of been puzzled by that since I saw that poll. Does that mean Oakland County voters are not showing up as strongly in that poll? Does that mean Lawrence and Hobbs are splitting the Oakland County vote and allowing Hanson to sort of run between them? I'm not sure, but I think that was the tension that we thought it set up when they drew that district the way they did, the first district to cross 8 Mile Road in Michigan. Who was going to get to represent that area? And so far we've had an Oakland County person, Gary Peters, do it, but we could end up with a Detroiter just in the second cycle.
Final word on that, Nolan?
Yeah, I think Hanson Clark enjoys high name recognition because he was in Congress. He has sort of the advantages of an incumbent, even though he isn't one. And he's got a high likability factor. So I would be not shocked if Hanson Clark pulled that out.